Hello, welcome back. So, what we're going to cover today is the 2022 trade deadline. Today was a bit quieter of a trade deadline than we've normally seen, but it's starting to look like general managers are trying to get their deals done for big players before the trade deadline itself. Kind of get that certainty, get the jump on people that may or teams that are trying to get a last minute deal on players. So the fact that Claude Giroux and Mark Giordano were traded is excellent, but they do not fall into this video because it was not done today. I'm only focusing on 10 trades that happened today. Not all of them because there's a whole lot of minor movement and things like that. But 10 trades that did stand out today that I felt like had some form of significance, and then I had to draw the line. There are other ones that did pop up, and I'd like to know what other people's thoughts are on trades that didn't make it in, or even the ones that did make it in here. But with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to move on over to our deadline PowerPoint. It's been a fun thing to be playing with to do these videos. I'm not going to lie. So this should come as a shock to nobody. This was the first one I wanted to cover. It was probably one of the top three biggest trades that were done today. That is Minnesota and Chicago. So Minnesota received Marc-Andre Fleury, and Chicago received in exchange a 2022 conditional second round pick. The fact that Kaapo Kähkönen made his exit from Minnesota today suggests to me that Minnesota sees a deep playoff run coming, and they needed a solid, experienced playoff goaltender to get them there. I completely agree with this move. I think it was probably the smartest move Minnesota could have made to get them that last step. That being said, Marc-Andre Fleury is a player that has a ton of mileage on him. Maybe 1 or 2 years in his entire career has he not made the playoffs. That's it. He's got 3 Stanley Cups to his name, which means that's 12 rounds right there. He's made a couple conference final appearances, things like that. So the question is, can he stay healthy through the playoffs? If he can, then absolutely there's no reason that Minnesota couldn't make a conference final appearance, which is nice and convenient because the condition on that pick becoming a first round pick is if Minnesota does make the conference final and 4 wins are from Fleury en route, then Chicago receives Minnesota's first round pick. So good pickup, a good trade. I think that really does help. Chicago is looking like they're needing higher draft picks. They're in a rebuild. What happens with Kane and Taves at this point is anybody's guess. We'll see how things go there. But I think Chicago could make really good use of that pick, whether it is a first or a second. And Minnesota absolutely is in the market for an experienced goaltender like Marc-Andre Fleury. The next one that came up for me was Vegas and Anaheim. So Anaheim received Evgeny Dadonov and a 2023 second round pick. I want to say that might have been conditional. I didn't put that in my notes, so it's probably a conditional pick. And then Vegas in return received John Moore and Ryan Kessler. So there's a little bit to unpack in this one. First and foremost, we'll go over Anaheim. So Dadonov is a $5 million a year player. So that's a little bit pricey, especially given his current production. It's not where it was when it was in Florida. And when he was in Florida, you could absolutely justify that $5 million, no problem. I think this was partially Vegas clearing a little bit of cap space, it sounds like. But Vegas does still get a player that, although has not scored 30 goals in a season, has scored 28 goals twice when he was in Florida. At the age of 33, he's currently on pace for 20. So a middle six forward, not too bad for a pickup. For Anaheim's pick, it's either going to be a 2023 or a 2024 pick. So I guess that'll be entirely up to them. John Moore, I actually was not aware of who that was, so I had to do a little bit of digging on this one. But from what I gathered, he's a big defenseman. He's 31. He's a $2.75 million cap hit through next year. Ryan Kessler is his contract is up at the end of this year at $6.875 million. That being said, Vegas is likely just going to turn around, throw it right into LTIR, and be done with it. And then officially, Ryan Kessler will no longer be a contracted player in the NHL. He suffered a career-ending injury, and obviously from that, never played again. So that'll kind of finally tie that off. The next trade that stuck out for me was Seattle and Minnesota again. Minnesota was actually pretty busy today. So Seattle received Victor Rask from Minnesota in exchange for future considerations. For anybody who doesn't know what future considerations are, we'll figure something out. Sometimes they just wind up being literally nothing. But because a trade cannot be a player for nothing or a player for cash, they have to say future considerations. So it's a boilerplate. It's a place marker, is all it is. So that being said, Seattle does receive Victor Rask. He was a strong producer when he was with the Carolina Hurricanes. I remember there was a lot of promise for him. Not like a hallmark type player, but a good solid player that a team could rely on. His production has receded over the last couple of years. He's split his time between Minnesota and Iowa, their farm teams. So we'll see what happens. But Rask is a UFA at the end of the year. So if Seattle can re-sign him for, say, $2 million, they could have a solid $2 million depth player. And that wouldn't be anything to scoff at, especially given the roster currently. It could give them something to kind of fill in a couple little gaps. But the Wild will retain 50% of Rask's contract, so Seattle will only be paying for $2 million. So not a bad deal. The next one, it was Winnipeg and New York. Winnipeg received Morgan Barron, a 2022 second round pick, a 2023 second round pick, and a 2023 fifth round pick. The New York Rangers received Andrew Kopp and a 2023 sixth round pick. There is a little bit to unravel here, so I'll go over the 2022 and 2023 second round picks. So they are conditional. One pick becomes a first if the Rangers win 2 rounds and Kopp plays 50% of the playoff games on the way there. If it does become a first round pick, then the other second round pick will become an option for Winnipeg. So they can either take the second round in 2022 or 2023. It'll be up to them. If the first condition is not met, then they are as stands, and it's just 2022 and 2023 second round each. I had to actually do a little bit of digging into Morgan Barron because I haven't watched him before. But what I did dig up, thanks to Elite Prospects, is that he was he's 23, he's 6'4" and about 220 pounds, and he plays center. So that fits the motif for Winnipeg. They typically seem to be enamored with larger players. I remember a few years ago, back when Dustin Byfuglien was still on the blue line, and you went through that blue line top to bottom, and they were huge. Like, I think the smallest guy was 6'3". So yeah, that definitely fits their motif. And at 23, there's still lots of room to work and figure out what they're going to do with Morgan Barron. On the New York side, Kopp is likely a bottom 6 rental for New York, just based on their the lineup they have now. He's only a $3.64 million player. Given that he's a rental, I'm pretty sure his contract is up at the end of the year anyway. But he's only 27, so he's right in the prime. So if they were looking to re-sign him, that could be an option for them. I do remember watching Andrew Kopp whenever the Jets would play Calgary, and he just seemed like a very responsible player. Not flashy, but definitely worth his $3.6 million cap hit. So not a bad pickup at all for New York. Actually, for either team, to be honest. Just granted where they're sitting currently. So the next deal that I looked at was Calgary and Chicago. So Calgary uh, received Ryan Carpenter, and Chicago received a 2024 fifth round pick. So Carpenter, I remember watching him in Vegas, and not a hugely flashy player, but a very hardworking, a very like Andrew Kopp, a very responsible player. He is a right hand shot, so that does help. He's likely there for the depth, especially since Brad Richardson was claimed off of waivers by Vancouver. So there's going to be a need to fill that spot moving forward. Um, Carpenter's, yeah, he's 31, a decent face-off man. Not nothing stellar, but definitely a penalty kill option for Calgary, which is never a bad thing to have. So I'd say for a fifth round pick, that was a pretty solid pickup on their part. So Dallas and Detroit. So Dallas receives Vladislav Nemestikov, and Detroit received a 2024 fourth round pick. So I'm going to say for Nemesnikov, he's a depth player. He's 29, so he's kind of coming out of the tail end of what you would be considered his prime. So he's played the best hockey he's going to play very likely. But he has played 538 games in the league. He does have 104 goals, 127 assists for 231 points. So he's falling right around that, you know, zero point 0.5 points per game. So not too bad. I think he will make a good fit in Dallas based on their needs. So not too bad at all. Detroit, obviously, um, Stevie Eiserman's going to pick up whatever picks he can get. That's never a bad thing to have. The one thing that did drive me nuts, and I'll make a note of this now, is that this year there was a whole lot of draft picks that were moved around. And draft picks always drive me nuts unless they're there to bolster a trade. But to just straight up trade a player for a draft pick, for me, it always just seemed like, okay, here's an IOU, and hopefully it works out. I'm not much of a gambler personally, but I would say for a fourth round pick, that wasn't too bad of a trade for my eyes. So the next one that we have is the buzzer beater. So this one actually was announced after trade deadline. They were still working it all out. I don't know how long it took for it to finally go through, but I only just found the deal about an hour ago myself. I also wasn't entirely looking. I was um, doing adulty type stuff, but I'm glad that this did show up in time for the video. So Carolina and Columbus made a trade that actually was a pretty solid trade for both sides. Uh, Bear in mind this was a three-way trade, so Florida is in here as well, and I'll explain how that all broke down, but the bulk of it was between these two teams. So Carolina received Max Domi and prospect Tyler Inamoto. Wow, so some of these names are pretty hard for me. And then Columbus received Aiden Hrashuk. I think I said that right. Right. So Domi's a player that if his cap hit wasn't so high, it probably would be a lot easier for him to be in one place. He is a good middle six player. He's not the top six that everyone had hoped he was when he was drafted by Arizona. But at $6 million, you know, you kind of have to be productive in order to find one spot to play. That being said, he is UFA at the end of the year, so he will revalue, and I don't see a reality where he does re-sign for $6 million again. unless Carolina sees production out of him that looks sustainable. Domi, um, uh, oh no, no. So yeah, that's the story with Domi. Tyler Inamoto, much like Morgan Barron, I did have to look into this one. So Inamoto is a prospect. He was drafted in the fifth round, 133rd overall by Florida in 2017. So not that old of a player. I really don't know what to say on that. I guess we'll just kind of have to see what Carolina does with him. Columbus received Aiden Hreishuk. He was a prospect as well, drafted in the third round, 94th overall by Carolina in 2021. So, not not an old player by any stretch of the imagination. That would make him what, about 19 maybe. So Columbus likely sees something there that they'll be able to build on and potentially have a player to build a team moving forward, say in a couple years, depending on how his development goes. So Florida, in the middle of all of this to help make this all work out, they received Igor Korshkov from Carolina, who was a 2022 sixth round pick, I think. I don't know. I short framed my notes. So, oh no, sorry. That was a player from Carolina, and they also received from Columbus a 2022 sixth round pick. Now, the one thing that does help Carolina and why they probably were able to make it work is that $1.5 million of Max Domi's contract is going to be retained by Columbus. So I would say at that point, if you're looking at $4.5 million, that makes sense for Carolina because Max Domi is the kind of player that any team can make use of. You just can't lean on him. Just let him do his thing, and he'll produce what he does produce, but don't expect the world from him, is what I would say is the best way to explain that. So the next one, here's a Hallmark trade, and this is why I was hoping that one of the jerseys I was hoping to wear today was available, but they made it into the wash right before I got home and started setting up for the video. I was actually initially thinking of wearing a Fleury Golden Knights jersey. That's the only one of his that I've got. And when I realized that was in the wash, I was like, wait, I can wear my Pittsburgh jersey. And that one went in there too. So, so, so Pittsburgh and Anaheim had quite the blockbuster deal. Pittsburgh received right winger Rickard Rakell from Anaheim, and Anaheim received a 2022 second round pick, Zach Aston Reese, Dominic Simone, and Callie Klang. So first and foremost, I can tell you right now, if they hadn't done so much to make this work, Rickard Rakell could have gone anywhere. Having played in Anaheim for the last 8 or 9 years, I've watched a lot of him. He's a very, very good forward. He's deadly, more often than not. So this kind of, I think, will help bolster Pittsburgh's top six forwards. There's no way that they don't make huge use out of him. Just praying that he doesn't get that thing that happens with players when they move, where sometimes it just doesn't translate to the new team. But as long as he keeps his feet under him and he works with the team, I don't see how he doesn't do incredibly well there. Anaheim's package, so the 2022 second round pick, that's not bad. We'll see where that goes for them. From what I understand, the draft is supposed to be pretty deep, and I imagine they will be in a pretty reasonable spot as far as draft position, so that could really actually work out nicely for them. Zach Aston Reese is a player that's kind of fallen on bad luck in Pittsburgh. I think he's better than what his stats this year have led on. So maybe a change of scenery is just kind of the bounce that he'll need, and hopefully he rounds back into form. Dominic Simone, a very, very solid player. Again, another one of those players that probably not a hallmark player for you, but he's got all the ins and outs, the good stuff that you're looking for in a player. which Anaheim absolutely can make huge use of. So, and as far as Callie Klang, I'm not familiar. I kind of ran out of time to look into who he was. But I do know he's a goaltender, so that kind of makes sense. They're probably looking at the next step to kind of follow behind John Gibson, knowing that he's not getting any younger, and hopefully that works out for them. So, Nashville and Seattle. This one stood out for me because Jeremy Lauzon actually came to Seattle from Boston. He's a defenseman, very hardworking, very gritty defenseman. I did like his body of work in Boston. I haven't been able to watch him a whole lot this year in Seattle, but again, a lot to like there. And Seattle gets a 2022 second round pick for him. I would say that's right on par with what you would expect to get for Lauzon. And Seattle at this point, I would think they're gonna kind of bulk up to kind of redraft the team, see what movement they could make, and just kind of take a mulligan from the expansion draft, and maybe they can set a little more solid of a team moving forward, and then start bolstering their drafting and development. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, not a whole lot there. Jeremy Lauzon, good defenseman. Nashville will absolutely have a spot for him that he'll fit in nicely, and Seattle receives a second round pick. You can't argue with that at all. Oh, wrong way. And then the last one. So this one I wanted to make a point of because throughout most of the morning, Burnaby Joe Sakic, was pretty quiet, and that surprised me because Colorado has started to look very human as of late. They're not that invincible juggernaut that they had commanded through most of the season. Now, that's not unusual. A lot of teams do that. Tampa did the same thing. Pittsburgh would start to fall off right after um, uh, the All Star break, and then right after trade deadline, they'd kick on the old playoff gear, and they were off and running. So nothing to be concerned about, but the fact that we hadn't heard anything from Colorado kind of surprised me because Colorado is one of those teams that they're right there, and they can feel the success that could be very reasonably in reach for them. You know, a minor tweak here or there, and I think this was the right one. So Montreal in this trade received Justin Barron, who's a prospect that Colorado had drafted, and a 2024 second round pick. So this is kind of right in line with a rebuild, which with where they are right now, that's not a shocker in the least. I would think that Montreal would completely understand that they are in a rebuild come next year. Colorado received Arturi Lehkonen. Now, Arturi Lehkonen is a player that I've always really liked. He's I seem to like depth players a lot. You know, the hallmark flashy players, your Austin Matthews, your Connor McDavid's, Sidney Crosby's, like they're fun and all, but you hear about them all the time. And I find that when I start hearing about the depth players as they're coming up, the budding players, my brain catches them and kind of gets an affinity for them a little bit easier. Arturi Lehkonen, he's 26, so he's right around that age where re-signing him would be nothing. He only has a cap hit of $2.3 million, which is not bad at all for his body of work, and he's a UFA at the end of the year. So I could see that if Colorado has the room for it come re-sign phase, I don't see why they wouldn't re-sign him, and I couldn't see why he wouldn't want to stay on a team that's as good as they are. Um, Arturi Lehkonen is good for. I'd say he'll probably hit about 20 goals and 25 assists for about 45 points this year. So at $2.3 million, that is awesome. Like that, you can't really ask for too much more than that. Um, Montreal, in receiving a prospect and a second round pick, is right in their wheelhouse. So Barron is a right-handed shot. He's a puck-moving defenseman that Colorado had drafted in 2020. Yeah, 2020. And I think that was when they were like 24th or 25th overall. So he has been playing in the Colorado Eagles this year, developing, getting things going. And I had to look it up, but he has five goals and 15 assists for 20 points in 43 games played. Um, so not too bad at all. Um, the one thing that kind of stood out for me though was he only has 8 penalty minutes in 43 games. So that tells you that that is a very responsible player, and especially that young, that's a lot to build on. And I could see why Montreal would have wanted him. So I would say that's one of those traits that, much like Tyler Toffoli and what Calgary gave up for to Montreal for Tyler Toffoli with Montreal. Again, it was one of those. Both teams saw what they needed, they saw what they had, and went, "Hey, here's how we can both benefit from this." I would say pretty solid trade. But if Colorado wins the cup, then I would say that this would be one of those final moves that Joe Sakic was looking for to get them there. So we'll definitely see that one trade alone. I would say for my money has made Colorado that much scarier. If they had tried to move out a high end piece, I would have gotten concerned. But a depth forward piece like that, especially because I'm pretty sure Graves got traded, I think. Um, so again, just one of those minor pieces, and a lot of times that's all it takes is that one little bit, and you're back off to the races. Um, so let me know what you guys think. Those were just the 10 that stood out to me. I know that there was a couple other ones. I know Oscar Sundquist got moved. Let me see if I can actually, real quick, just rattle off a couple here because I got it right here anyway. So Michael McNiven went to Ottawa from Calgary for future considerations. Any trade that just said future considerations, I pretty well avoided because again, that's for me. That's going here's a player for free. That's really not interesting to me. Derek Brassard, who's played for a ton of teams. It seems like he's been around for literally forever. He went to the Edmonton Oilers, so that's a solid pickup for them, but does not solve anything. So the concern I have is that the Edmonton Oilers missed their opportunity to get back into the hunt. It will be a very steep uphill battle if they do still want to make the playoffs. And even if they make it, it's going to be even harder for them to stay there. Andrew Hammond went to New Jersey from Montreal for Nate Schnarr. Zach Sanford went to Winnipeg from Ottawa. I always liked Zach Sanford. He was, from what I understand, he can be a bit of a divisive player, but in the 2019 run for the St. Louis Blues, that seemed like he really stood out. That he's a little bit more than what people really acknowledge him for. Um, let's see. St. Louis picked up Nick Leddy and Luke Witowski for Jake Wallman, Oscar Sundquist, another Blues player that won the Cup, and a 2023 second round. That really didn't seem like it changed a whole lot for me. The interesting piece there was Nick Leddy for St. Louis. That's a team that really didn't need to make a whole lot of adjustments, so it was interesting that a defenseman was what moved. Zach Senyshyn went to Ottawa from Boston. I liked Zach Senyshyn. I think he'll do really well in Ottawa, and I think being on a team that isn't so top end loaded may actually benefit him. The Edmonton Oilers picked up Brett Kulak in exchange for William Lagesson, 2022 second round and a 2024 seventh round. Kulak, who has previously played for Calgary, really didn't really impress, so it wasn't hard to move on from him. But I hope he does do well there. Alex Biega to Nashville for future considerations. I didn't know Alex Biega was still playing. Capo Kakinen to San Jose for Jacob Middleton. And yeah, so those were a few of them that stood out. And I also saw that Marcus Johansson did go back to the Capitals. Um, as a feel good as that is, it really seemed inconsequential, so it didn't really stand out. I just went, "Oh, that's cool to hear," and I'm over it. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think. That was a fun trade deadline. I did track most of that while I was at work. In between tasks, check the phone. Um, and yeah, we'll see how things go from there. I may see if I can try and track like a post trade deadline power rankings from now till the end of the season. I'll see what I can throw together and see if we can kind of measure out how the trades impacted the teams in the short term. I think that could be a fun idea. That being said, let me know what your favorite trade was, if you had one, and if you have any suggestions for other videos that we can do, let me know, and I'll see if I can get them done. Until the next video, stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe. If you did like the video, please drop a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you, and all the best.